Welcome to Nice and Blunt. I'm Adam Riancho, and it's week 18. These are my wide receiver rankings, and they're intended for half PPR. The only question this week is, will your team be playing their starters or resting them? That really throws a wrench into week 18. So that's why I don't recommend playing in week 18. If you can change the rules this offseason, have your season end in week 17, and avoid this weird scenario that happens every year. So the four teams that I'd be very concerned about would be Philadelphia, who are definitely benching starters. I'm not starting AJ Brown or Davante Smith this week. Expect bagels from both of them. But the Rams are also expected to bench starters. Maybe Puka Nacua is on the field for like 5 snaps because he only needs 10 yards to hit 1,000. But in general, neither of them, Kupp or Puka Nacua, will be on the field for this game. So definitely bench both of the Rams and Eagles wide receivers, but I have major concerns starting any Chiefs or Bills receivers. It's still a bit up in the air how much they will play. With the Bills, it's expected that their starters won't be on the field for more than 2 drives, a quarter max. With the Chiefs, sounds like they're going to bench their starters, but Xavier Worthy's a rookie. How many snaps will he actually play? I don't know. And then DeAndre Hopkins has some contract incentives to play for. And then Marquise Brown has barely played this season. So I'm sure they'd all probably like to play. I do not know what Andy Reid is going to do with them in this game. So all 4 of those teams have some major question marks. I thought the Texans might have one as well. They have no chance to move in the playoff bracket, but it sounds like they're going to play their starters. So Nico Collins is probably safe. I'm not totally sure why. But then the Chargers, I think they'll be playing everyone, assuming the Steelers do lose on Saturday. If the Steelers lose, they have a chance at the 5 seed, and McConkey will definitely be on the field. If the Steelers win, then the Chargers are kind of locked into the 6 seed, and there's no reason to risk it. So monitor the status on the Steelers game. That will change whether or not McConkey is in your lineup this week. But otherwise, all the other teams are expected to start everyone, and as long as they're healthy, I do think they're in your lineup this week. So let's get going. We have Ja'Marr Chase at Pittsburgh at the top, and this one is pretty obvious. He's been the wide receiver 1 all season. It's a must-win game. They need a chance at the playoffs, and I expect Ja'Marr to go off on the Steelers. At number 2, we have Justin Jefferson at Detroit. Another must-win game for the Vikings, and the Lions' defense is pretty non-existent right now. I expect Jefferson to dominate. At number 3, we have T. Higgins at Pittsburgh. Just like Ja'Marr Chase, it's a must-win, and he was the number 1 receiver last week. No one is benching T. Higgins. He needs 142 yards to reach 1K on the season. I do think he gets it. At number 4, I'm obviously starting Brian Thomas Jr., a revelation this season. Truly an elite player on a team that will not be benching him for any of those snaps. Brian Thomas Jr., a must-start this week. At number 5, I have Amon-Ra St. Brown versus the Vikings, and it is a must-win as well, and he's a guaranteed touchdown waiting to happen. It should be a shootout, but his matchup is not as good as anyone I rank above him. Then we have Mike Evans versus New Orleans, and it's a must-win for Tampa. Not only that, Mike Evans is going for the record books. He needs 5 more catches and 85 yards to hit another consecutive 70-catch 1,000-yard season. It would be his 11th 1,000-yard season in a row. So I'm definitely expecting Evans to be lights out. Baker Mayfield keeps talking about it, and you know for a fact he'll get it. He's also 2 touchdowns away from matching last year's total of 13 touchdowns. So Mike Evans did miss some time this season. If he gets 2 touchdowns, 5 catches, 85 plus yards, don't be surprised. At least the catches and the yards, I think, are a minimum projection this week for Mike Evans. Then at number 7, I have Jameson Williams versus Minnesota, and he's been even more involved than Amon-Ra St. Brown. At least in fantasy, you can almost expect more touchdowns to go to JMO. So a must start, truly a stud, and in this offense with no defense to speak of at all, expect a touchdown and maybe multiple. It will be a shootout. Jameson Williams only needs 33 more yards for 1,000 receiving yards. I expect him to smash that total. Wouldn't be shocked if he hits 1,100 on the season after this game. At number 8, I have Jordan Addison at Detroit. And just like Jameson Williams, T. Higgins, these number 2 receivers on these prolific passing offenses are just money in the bank. The ceiling is so high, the touchdown's kind of guaranteed to hit. And Jordan Addison only needs 125 yards to surpass 1,000 on the year. I think he gets it. I think Addison will be dominant this week. I think all of these 8 players have to be in your lineup. Must starts this week. Then at number 9, I think we're dropping down a tier, but still getting very reliable players in your lineup. I think they have to be started if you roster them. I have DJ Moore at Green Bay, and DJ Moore has a few milestones to be chasing this week. He needs 11 more catches for 100 on the season. That might not happen. I'm not convinced he gets 11 catches this week, but he only needs 120 yards for 1,000 plus on the year, and I do expect that one to hit. So DJ Moore is a reliable option this week, very safe floor, and Jair Alexander is out. He's not going to play, and that's the toughest matchup to worry about. DJ Moore could maybe not only get the 120 yards, but also the 11 catches. That would be an insane fantasy game from DJ Moore. So you have to start him in the first game this season against the Packers. He had 7 catches, 62 yards, and I think that is his floor. It probably gets doubled. At number 10, I have JSN, Jaxon Smith-Njigba at the Rams, and there's some major incentives for Geno Smith this week, and you know for a fact he will definitely throw it to his top target because Geno Smith needs 186 yards for a $2 million contract incentive. He also gets another $2 million if the Seahawks win, and then if his completion percentage is 66% or higher this week, he will get another $2 million bonus in his contract. So with Geno Smith playing for a potential $6 million, you know that JSN, his top receiver, will be balls to the wall elite. I expect JSN to be very productive this week against the Rams, a top 10 start for sure. Then at number 11, I am definitely starting Courtland Sutton no matter what. He is in a must-win scenario. The Broncos have to win to get in, and he needs 82 yards for a $500,000 bonus. It's about 1,060 plus on the season. Kind of a strange number to hit, but still, Courtland Sutton probably gets it. I expect him to go over 80 yards this week, along with the touchdown against the Chiefs in a must-win. Then at number 12, we have George Pickens versus the Bengals, and this game is kind of a must-win. While their playoff spot is locked up, they do not want the 6 seed. They do not want to travel to Baltimore in the wildcard round. That would happen with a loss here. Along with the Chargers win, they would relinquish that 5 seed in a matchup with the Texans. So I expect them to try their best. I still think the Bengals will win, but George Pickens should play well. He played very well against them in Week 13 at Cincinnati. He had 6 targets, 3 catches, 74 yards, and a touchdown. That was the last time we saw him before that injury, and 14.9 points was his total in Week 13. So expect that to happen again. The Bengals defense is still pretty bad, and George Pickens needs 100 yards in this game in order to hit 1,000 on the year. So I do think that'll happen. I do think Pickens will be dominant. I expect him to at least get close to it and have a double-digit fantasy floor for sure. I would be starting George Pickens this week in my lineup. Number 13, I'm also starting Malik Nabers at Philadelphia, and the Giants are playing for pride. They do not care about losing and getting a better draft pick. So I expect Malik Nabers to continue to get this type of volume. He's been reliable from a floor standpoint all season, and if the touchdown hits like it did last week, then Nabers has a elite ceiling. So definitely start him. The Eagles probably want the Giants to win and worsen their draft pick in the first place. So don't be surprised if Cooper DeJean and Quinion Mitchell also sit out at some point in this game. I expect Malik Nabers to dominate against the Eagles. At number 14, we have Jerry Jeudy at Baltimore, and there was a lot of panic with Dorian Thompson-Robinson. That first game, the target share was terrible, but then David Njoku got hurt, and last week, Jerry Jeudy, even in the wind, had 18 targets. He caught 12 of them for 94 yards, and while he's not getting targeted down the field anymore, if you're getting double-digit targets for Jerry Jeudy, you have to start him. So against the Ravens, there's probably going to be a blowout here, which means garbage time should be relevant. and I would expect Judy to still get double-digit targets. Again, a pretty safe floor with 18 targets last week. At number 15, if you told me for sure that they start everyone in LA, I think McConkey would probably move up these rankings. But there's also a question mark regarding what will happen. If the Steelers win, then McConkey probably gets benched because they don't need to play for anything in that game. So assuming McConkey is active, I'm definitely starting him a top 15 wide receiver in my rankings, and he probably has a toe-to-toe matchup against Brock Bowers on Sunday in Vegas. But if the Steelers win, there's nothing really to play for the Chargers anymore, and I would expect McConkey, who's been banged up a lot lately, to probably sit out and just get some rest. So that's the only concern with McConkey. I expect them to start him, though. I think the Bengals will win, and I think the Chargers will try to get that 5 seed. I think that's what's going to be the case. So not expecting McConkey to sit, but it is possible. Monitor the status. You'll know for sure by the time Saturday is over. Then at 16, we have Drake London versus the Panthers, and it's a must-win game for the Falcons. They still need some help even if they win, but expect them to start everyone. And London played a full snap share last week with Michael Penix. He had 13 targets, clearly the go-to wide receiver option in that offense. So London has to be started. Maybe the touchdowns don't hit. The Falcons rarely throw them, but still London getting 13 targets is a must start. Very high floor in that scenario. Then at 17, I have Jalen McMillan versus New Orleans, who's in a must-win game. And in the last 4 weeks, McMillan has a minimum of 5+ catches, 50+ yards, and at least 1 touchdown in each of those games. He actually has 6 total touchdowns in that span. So one of them was also ripped out of his hands. He could have had 7 over the last 4 games. And with Cade Otton yet to practice, Sterling Shepard, even if he returns, isn't going to scare me away. Jalen McMillan is a true lock in your lineup right now. If you started him last week, like I told you, he put up over 20 points. He was fantastic yet again. So have to start him a top 20 play, a lock in your lineup, in my opinion. Number 18, we have Terry McLaurin at Dallas, and his usage has been slightly interesting the last few games as they've pivoted away from a run-first offense. Olamide Zaccheus and Zach Ertz have way more volume and touchdowns than Terry. So kind of shocking last week, but I still think he's a must start. However, he has locked up all of the milestones this season. He has his 5th straight year with over 1,000 receiving yards and over 70 catches, along with 12 touchdowns. So I don't think Terry is going to be demanding the ball. There's also a ton of incentives this week for Zach Ertz. I think it could be a massive Ertz game, and that's why I don't rank Terry in the top 10. He's at the bottom of this tier. I still think you're starting him in the top 20. I think you have to, but I kind of worry about the ceiling. It has not been there the last couple games. So as Zaccheus has stepped up, as Ertz probably steps up, I think McLaurin maybe only gets 1 touchdown this week, and he's more of a low-end wide receiver 2, not a clear top 10 player like he has been all season. But behind Terry at number 19, I have Nico Collins as the last player in this tier at Tennessee. And personally, I'm not really understanding why the Texans are starting everyone. They have nothing to play for. They can't change their seed, but I guess they've been playing so terribly, they need to get back in the rhythm. So Nico Collins is expected to play. However, I'm not convinced he plays a full game here. I still kind of feel like they're going to be cautious with him. However, he only needs 32 yards in this game to go over 1,000 on the season. So that's going to be his floor. Maybe he gets 40 and they sit him down. I doubt he plays more than 3 quarters. Even a full half is kind of shocking to me, in my opinion. So I am probably wrong. Maybe he's fine, but he has been disappointing the last 2 games. If you've been starting him in the fantasy playoffs, he has not been the safest option. There have been way higher options otherwise. So not my favorite play this week, definitely concerning, but based on name value, I think you have to keep him in the lineup. At number 20, I have Davante Adams, who does drop down a tier, but still a pretty safe play this week because of the historical landmarks at stake for Aaron Rodgers. Rodgers is sitting at 499 touchdowns. It was the case last week, and they didn't do anything on offense, so there's still 1 more game for that to happen. And I do expect him to throw his 500th career touchdown, and every report indicates Davante Adams is going to be the one catching that touchdown. So expect Adams to hit it. In week 14, he had 8 catches for 109 yards and a touchdown against the Dolphins in the first matchup, and this game is at home. I do expect Adams to play well. He needs 25 yards as well to go over 1,000 yards on the year, so that's going to happen. He's also going to catch a touchdown. I expect Rodgers to get him that touchdown. So Adams is fine, but maybe not like the highest ceiling. He may sit down after that happens. I wouldn't be shocked if it did. So that's the only concern, but odds are the floor is still pretty safe. And then at 21, there is usually some touchdown upside for Keenan Allen as well. Against the Packers, it's not the best matchup. In the first game, Keenan only had 4 receptions for 41 yards. He was not as good as Rome Odunze in that matchup. So maybe it happens again, but in general, Keenan has been a go-to target for Caleb Williams. If we look at the last 6 games for Keenan, he has an average of 10.3 targets per game, along with 5 total touchdowns in those 6 games. So I would expect something similar to happen this week. And in general, Keenan has 4 games with 70 yards and a touchdown in that span as well. So very high ceiling, decent floor generally. I think Keenan is a must start, in my opinion. I would have him in the lineup. I'm also not going to bench Adam Thielen this week. At the Falcons, I expect a touchdown for him as well. Adam Thielen has 99 plus yards in 3 of his last 5 games, and with 4 total touchdowns, 3 of them coming in the last 2 weeks, I expect more of the same. I think he's a very safe floor play, just like Adams probably goes over double digits guaranteed, and he probably gets involved here. I think it would be fun for the Panthers to play spoiler against a division rival, the Falcons. So while their running backs are injured, their offense is going to be throwing it a lot more. Adam Thielen is the safest bet. I expect a touchdown to go his way once again this week. Number 23, I have Zay Flowers versus Cleveland, and it's a must-win game to lock up the division, and it's probably a blowout. If Flowers doesn't score in the first half, though, maybe they're up by so much, he does get benched because they don't need him in the second half. So that's the only red flag with Flowers, but odds are if they're going to get to a 25, 30 point lead, then Flowers probably is a big reason why and does get in the end zone in that process. So I'd still be starting him, but sometimes he does burn you. There's a slight risk level, but Flowers has massive upside. I still expect a top 25 performance from Flowers in Week 18. I would start him for sure. After last week, I'm also going to start Michael Pittman versus Jacksonville. In 4 games with Flacco this season, Pittman has 3 touchdowns and 2 games with 100-plus yards. So if you're telling me it's a 50-50 proposition for him to go over 100 yards, and he's already done very well against Jacksonville this season, I would expect Pittman to be very good. He's averaging 92 yards per game in his last 4 versus Jacksonville. So expect a touchdown. I think Pittman is a reliable top target for Flacco. And at home, I think they play well. Give me Pittman as a top 25 play, high floor for him this week. Number 25, I also expect a very high floor for Jakobi Meyers this week because he only needs 96 yards to reach 1,000 on the year. Maybe it doesn't happen, but they will try to get him that number. And he's been a reliably high floor play all season long. The volume will be there. In terms of targets, I do trust Jakobi Meyers a lot. So I would start him at number 25. I think he's a very safe floor play. Should go over double digits. I would expect 7-8 catches for 95 plus yards. Then at 26, we have Marvin Harrison Jr. versus San Francisco, and this would be shocking if he hits it. But Marvin Harrison Jr. needs 178 yards to go over 1,000. So they'll at least give him a shot for that to happen. They will give him some targets down the field, but if he doesn't do anything in the first half, they might give up on it in the second. So Harrison, I don't think goes over 1,000, but it is possible, and there is some incentive to get him the ball a lot. I think against the Niners, that game could be high scoring. Marvin Harrison has some appeal. I rank him top 30 this week, and lately I've been ranking him more closer to like 35, even wide receiver 40. But this week, I would give him a slight upgrade because maybe he does at least go over 900 and gets close to 100 plus yards this week. At 27, I have DK Metcalf at the Rams. And just like Harrison, I have been fading Metcalf a lot lately, and it's been working out. But this week, I do think Geno Smith is so motivated to play well that Metcalf should get involved. Not only does he need 61 yards to go over 1,000 himself, I think he will get it. Geno Smith has up to $6 million in contract bonuses at stake this week, and one of them involves 200 plus passing yards. I expect a lot of that to go to JSN, but otherwise, it will be going to Metcalf and Charbonnet. So Metcalf will go over 60 yards this week. I think that's a pretty safe bet. And then Geno also needs to win the game and have a high completion percentage. For his other incentives, I think Metcalf could score a touchdown as well. There's a lot of reasons why Geno needs to win this week. So definitely I'm trusting the Seahawks passing game this week. There's a lot of reasons to feel confident in the floor. And that's why he's above this tier break. I think a double-digit projection for Metcalf is a pretty safe bet this week. But below the line, I still think there's a lot of upside here. I just don't know for sure what will happen. A lot of them have backup quarterbacks as well, and it could get a little dicey. But at 28, I have Jauan Jennings at Arizona, and he needs 77 yards this week to go over 1,000 on the season. I think it will happen. I think he'll get plenty of volume, but with Josh Dobbs, it's not the safest bet. It could burn you, but still I think Jennings will go over 1,000 on the year with 77 in week 18. Number 29, we have Tyreek Hill at the Jets, who needs 61 yards to crack 1,000. And with Tyler Huntley, it's not the best bet possible, but still I think against the Jets, he can hit it. They're very banged up in the secondary, and it's also a must-win game. The Dolphins have no shot at the playoffs if they lose. I expect Tyreek Hill to lay it all out on the line. At number 30, I have Calvin Ridley versus Houston, who needs 59 yards for 1,000 on the year, and I do think he'll get it. I think 60 yards is very achievable, and Ridley should get at least 8 targets. I think he'll be a fine floor play this week. Then I have Garrett Wilson versus Miami at 31, and Garrett Wilson only needs 3 catches to go over 100 on the season, but I would expect Adams to be favored in this game. If Rodgers is trying to get that record 500th touchdown, you know for a fact he'll be sending all those targets to Adams in the first half of the game, and then once it happens, there may not be a second touchdown to share. So I think Garrett Wilson has a fine floor this week. In general, that's usually what he offers, but the ceiling, I wouldn't bet on it unless it happens late in the game. Garrett Wilson probably does not find the end zone this week against the Dolphins. At 32, I have Deebo Samuel at Arizona, and it may be his last game of his career with the Niners. That's definitely possible. Perhaps they trade Ayuk instead, but there's a lot of indication to believe they're more likely to trade Deebo this offseason. So maybe it's a swan song game and they give him a ton of volume, but he does have a history of kind of mediocre games against the Cardinals. In 9 career matchups, he only has 4 career touchdowns, and he rarely goes over 80 yards against the Cardinals. But even if that happens, if he gets 80 yards, that's still a decent floor. I could see a lot of volume for Deebo because of the scenario with this team I just mentioned. It's probably his last game with them. And in the last 2 weeks, he has scored back-to-back touchdowns in 2 straight games. So it does look like Shanahan is trying to get him the ball, but with Josh Dobbs, it's not the same offense, and I'm a bit worried about the ceiling. However, based on the last 2 games, I still think he's a viable floor play. As a flex option, I think you could do way worse. At wide receiver 32, I'd probably still start him from a floor standpoint. I think he'll be fine. But honestly, if you told me Olamide Zaccheus has a better game and a couple touchdowns again, I wouldn't be shocked. I'm tempted to rank Zaccheus way higher in these rankings. I think he's almost as valuable as someone like Adam Thielen, Davante Adams, because Jane Daniels really loves to target him in the red zone, but there's a ton of incentives for Zach Ertz this week, and that's why I'm concerned. I think there is a lot of risk. Just like Deebo Samuel, I do not know for sure what will happen, but last week I did rank him around this number as well, and he was even better than I expected. Zaccheus is not bad at all. Just like Marvin Mims, he's also in a must-win game. I could see another big game for Mims. He had a breakout last week with over 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He caught all 8 of his targets, and in the last 5 games, he has at least 3 catches in all of them. So it does look like Bo Nix trusts Marvin Mims a lot right now, and it's about time we have a clear number 2 receiver in Denver. It looks like it's Mims, at least for the moment, and I expect that to continue. So high ceiling last week. He had over 25 fantasy points last week, and it could happen again. He's getting targeted way down the field. It's just a question of will the touchdowns hit. There's a lot of upside with both Zaccheus and Marvin Mims at 33 and 34. But 35 and 36, I have both of the Packers receivers, and against Chicago, they should be fine. But it's a question of will Christian Watson suit up? The offense is much different with Watson on the field. However, Christian Watson has yet to practice, and I think they're going to hold him out, make sure he's healthy for the playoffs. So that means Romeo Doubs is the safer bet at receiver there. Last week, he had a ton of volume, and he was way safer than Jayden Reed. So if I was starting one Packers wideout, it would be Romeo Doubs. But honestly, I have no idea what to expect from any of them any given week. It's a weird offense in the passing game, and Jayden Reed has really let you down. Last week, he was terrible. So it's a must-win game for Green Bay. They need a win in order for just a chance at the 6th seed, and if they lose, then they're guaranteed a matchup on the road at Philadelphia in the wildcard round. So they'd much rather get the Rams or Tampa Bay instead, and so they're at least going to try to win the game. I expect them to get it done, but the Commanders probably still win as well, and it's probably irrelevant. They still probably get locked in to the 7 seed, in my opinion. So we'll see what happens, but there's always some upside in this offense. Against Chicago, Romeo Doubs and Jayden Reed are low-end flex plays. I'd probably pass, given the randomness in Green Bay. Then at 37, this is very interesting, but I think Mack Hollins is going to have a good game this week at the Patriots because there are 2 contract incentives on the line here for a total $250 up for grabs. If he gets 2 catches this week, Mack Hollins will make $50,000 as a bonus. If he gets 72 receiving yards as well, he will get an extra $200,000. So I really think that's going to happen. They're going to be benching the majority of starters after the first quarter. And even with Mitchell Trubisky, I still expect Mack Hollins to get the ball. So 2 catches for 72 yards, very achievable, and maybe he needs like 5 catches in order to get that number. So expect some volume. I expect Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman, as well as Amari Cooper, to be sitting on the bench for the most part, and that's why Mack Hollins will probably run the most routes in Buffalo. He's a top 40 receiver. I was tempted to rank him higher, but obviously he may burn you, and you wouldn't be shocked, especially without Josh Allen. At 38, the last player in this tier would be MVS, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, at Tampa Bay, and if he catches a touchdown, he himself also wins $250,000 in a roster bonus. So I expect that touchdown to hit. They're at least going to target him in the end zone, and I do think MVS plays well enough to offer a 7-8 point floor in fantasy. The touchdown definitely offers the chance to go over 10. So you could do a lot worse. I think MVS kind of the last player I'm like interested in starting. The rest of the way, I think there's way too many red flags to really trust. But obviously, Nick Westbrook-Ikhine has been just as reliable for touchdowns as MVS has. So he's the next player at 39. You're just betting on a touchdown. He needs 53 yards and 1 touchdown, though, to have a 500-yard, 10-touchdown season. If that happens, it wouldn't shock me that much. So definitely some upside with Nick Westbrook-Ikhine, but in general, he's kind of an unreliable start. I'd probably pass, but maybe it does work out. He could go over 50 yards and a touchdown just to get those numbers. Then at 40, we have Wan'Dale Robinson at Philadelphia, who's actually been really good the last 2 games. 18 targets, 12 catches, 133 yards, and last week he scored a touchdown. That's an average of 12.6 points per game, but without the touchdown, which rarely hits with Drew Lock, you're only getting about 9.5, and that's still kind of an optimistic projection for Wan'Dale, in my opinion. So maybe he's safe for 10 plus, but in general, I probably wouldn't expect more than 8, and that's why at wide receiver 40, I'd probably still bench Wan'Dale if I had him. But I do think he's a safe option. Maybe I should have him ranked above the tier break, given his recent success with Drew Lock in New York. But at 41, I'm very concerned about Jaylen Waddle with Tyler Huntley at quarterback. He plays the Jets. It's not the worst matchup given all their injuries, but he did not play the last 2 games, and on Wednesday, he was only limited in practice. So it's a must-win. I think he will be on the field, but without Tua, it's just not the same offense, and I'd probably only trust Tyreek Hill. I'm going to bench Waddle this week. I don't think the upside is worth it in that Dolphins offense on the road with a backup quarterback. At 42, I have Rashod Bateman versus Cleveland, who could have a massive game this week, especially if they bench Zay Flowers a bit early. But it's going to be a blowout versus the Browns. You expect a 40-10 type of score, and Bateman could easily get targeted down the field and offer a 50-yard house call at any time. So definitely some upside. It's always coming with some risk, but if you are desperate at this point, I would consider Bateman as an interesting flyer in your lineup. Just like Quentin Johnston, who I have one spot behind him. When Quentin Johnston has a good game, it often comes with a touchdown, and sometimes it's even multiple touchdowns. QJ, shockingly, has 8 touchdowns on the season. So maybe with 2 touchdowns, they're trying to get him to 10. That would be fucking awesome, but I probably wouldn't bet on it. And if the Steelers do win on Saturday, then QJ probably gets benched for the sake of rest on Sunday. So if the Steelers lose, then Quentin Johnston will be on the field. If they don't, then they have no shot at the 5 seed. And just like Ladd McConkey, I would expect him to sit down for this one. So probably going to bench him. There's always some upside, though. Quentin Johnston has a bit of appeal if you're desperate, especially in DFS. But at 44, despite the breakout game last week, I'm probably still benching Ricky Pearsall at Arizona. I do not know what the chemistry is going to look like with Josh Dobbs, and I really don't trust those downfield passes like I would with Brock Purdy. So no thanks with Pearsall. I think I'd only trust Deebo and Jauan Jennings, and even they feel kind of risky as well, especially because Pearsall lit it up last week. So maybe you'll take a shot on it, but I think you're playing with fire with Dobbs, and I'm going to pass. I think just like Quentin Johnston and Rome Odunze, it's a best case scenario if they find the end zone and get you like barely 10 points. And that's why I have Rome Odunze at 45. I have no idea what the target share will look like. It feels like Keenan and DJ Moore are the only reliable options in that offense. So going to bench him, but I will mention in the first matchup against the Packers, Rome did play a lot better than Keenan. He had 10 targets, 6 catches for 65 yards. Keenan had 4 for 41. So maybe it happens again, but odds are this is a heavy DJ Moore game, and the touchdown does not hit for Rome Odunze. At 46, I got Darnell Mooney versus Carolina, and it's a must-win game. And in the last 2 weeks, Mooney is averaging 60 yards per game with Michael Penix on about 5.5 targets per game. That's less than half, though, of Drake London. London just got 13 last week. So not expecting a lot from Mooney. I don't think he hits a touchdown, and he only needs 8 yards to go over 1,000 on the season. He'll get the 8, but I don't think he'll get more than like 60. I'd probably bench Mooney. I don't expect a touchdown from him with the Falcons. At number 47, the last player who you might be willing to consider from a floor standpoint would be Josh Downs versus Jacksonville, but it appears that Joe Flacco prefers to throw the ball to Michael Pittman. Last week, Downs was a heavy number 2 behind Michael Pittman. So this is a clear run-first offense. It feels pretty risky. I'm probably just going to bench Josh Downs. I'd rather avoid it with the Colts passing game in general. Then we're dropping down a tier, and there's a chance that none of these players start at all, but there's also a chance that they do, and I do want to leave that upside open because DeAndre Hopkins has 500,000 reasons to play this week. If he scores 1 touchdown, his contract will get him an extra $5,000 bonus this week. So maybe they sit him the entire game, but I think he's going to be vying to start. And even with Carson Wentz, I could envision on the first drive, they get in the red zone, get him a touchdown, and then get him a seat on the bench. I think as long as that happens, there's nothing else to risk with Hopkins after that. But in the first quarter, I expect them to at least give him a shot to have it. So that's why I think Hopkins is interesting, my favorite Chiefs receiver this week, but I really could be wrong. He may not play at all. And right now, I don't know for sure what the snap share will be for Hopkins. Same applies with Worthy. He's a rookie, so why sit him? But then why are they starting any of their players on offense this week? I really don't know what will happen with Worthy, but it does sound like he will at least start the game and probably get benched by the end of the first quarter. So maybe just like with Hopkins, there is a touchdown looming for Xavier Worthy. So maybe take a shot on it, but I think with the contract incentive for Hopkins, I would much rather bet on D-Hop than Worthy. But just like them in Buffalo, Khalil Shakir and Keon Coleman are major risks this week. I have no idea how long they'll be on the field. And with the incentives for Mack Hollins, I definitely expect them to be benched by the end of the first quarter. So maybe they have some upside. Maybe they play longer than I'm expecting, but probably they should just be unranked, and if I get more clarity tomorrow, then I will remove them from the ranks entirely. So good luck with them. I'm going to pass on all of the Chiefs and Bills receivers, and behind Coleman, I also have Marquise Brown, who has barely played this season. I imagine he wants to be on the field, but given he was banged up a lot this year, they probably don't risk it. I think he's the most likely to have no value at all of the 5 players I just mentioned. But then number 53, I don't think will play. It's Christian Watson versus Chicago. And if he does, I think he'd be way more interesting. Probably a top 35 receiver in the same range as Deebo Samuel and Garrett Wilson, because Watson is very reliable from a yard standpoint. The touchdowns haven't been hitting, but when healthy, Watson is the most valuable receiver in Green Bay as of late. So we'll see what happens. He did not practice on Wednesday. He did not play last week, and I think they're just going to save him for the playoffs. But if he is available, I could see massive upside for a guy like Christian Watson, who I rank at 53. I'm probably just going to bench him, though. At 54, maybe take a shot on Alec Pierce. You know what you're betting on. It's a deep touchdown or nothing. And just like the rest of these players, way too much risk for me to trust. But maybe a shot at a touchdown is worth betting on. I doubt it, though. I'm probably going to bench him if it was me. And then outside of this tier, there is a path for success with all these players, but I don't think I trust them enough. We have Demarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell of the Rams back-to-back at 55 and 56. I expect Kupp and Puka to be benched, but with Jimmy Garoppolo, what are we going to get from this offense? It's still Sean McVay calling the plays, so it could still work out, but I'd probably only trust Blake Corum if I was going to start a backup in LA this week. I'm probably just going to bench Demarcus Robinson and Tutu Atwell, but there's a world where they both get 10 targets, and I'm ranking them way too low against Seattle. Number 57, we have Calvin Austin III versus the Bengals, and it's kind of a must-win for the Steelers, so Russell Wilson will need to throw a lot in order to keep up and keep pace with the Bengals offense. Austin does get targeted down the field. I'd rather go Austin than Mike Williams, but still, I'd probably bench Calvin Austin. Then at 58, it's pretty random to predict Patriots wide receivers, but I think Kayshon Boutte does have the most value. He had a pretty good game against the Bills a couple weeks ago. However, last week was terrible. I think it could bounce back. If I was going to bet on one Pats receiver, it would be Kayshon Boutte. I think Drake May likes him the most. Then at 59, we have Andre Yoshivas at Pittsburgh, and it's a must-win for the Bengals. However, he's going to be overshadowed by Chase and Higgins all throughout the game. There is always potential, though, that Yoshi scores a touchdown. That's what you're betting on at this point in the ranks. And then last week, Parker Washington also scored a touchdown himself. All of the targets can't just go to Brian Thomas. So the Colts defense sucks. At least 50 yards or a touchdown in 4 of the last games have happened for Parker Washington. He has 2 touchdowns total in those 5 games. So the ceiling is interesting, but generally Parker Washington is scraping the bottom of the barrel. At wide receiver 60, I would bench him in my lineup. So that's it for this video, the top 60 receivers in week 18, and I would definitely be starting the top 8 no matter what. I expect 20 plus points from all of them. Then the top 19, I think all have to be in your lineup. You're probably going to start them expecting at least 14 plus. And while Nico Collins, Terry McLaurin kind of scare me a little bit, I still think they're fine, safe enough to bet on, but maybe Ladd McConkey does sit out if the Steelers win on Saturday. Then 20 through 27, I think are the safest low-end wide receiver 2s. The players I'd be trying to start if I could, along with the top 23 running backs, those are the best plays in an average 12-team league. Davante Adams through DK Metcalf, I think will still go over 10 points this week. But then at 28 through 38, Jauan Jennings through MVS, I think you're in the low-end flex territory, and there's definitely a reason to be benching these players, but also a path for success, very high upside if they do find the end zone and play well. So good luck with them. I think outside the top 40, once we definitely pass Wan'Dale Robinson, that's the cutoff point. I'd be benching them for sure this week, but you never know. I could be ranking them too low. There's always some fluke stuff that happens at receiver. But that's going to be it for this video. If you enjoyed, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more content like this. I'll see you next time. We'll do quarterback, tight end, and defense rankings tomorrow. But until then, hit that subscribe button. And my name's Adam Riancho. Thank you for watching. Nice and blunt.